I'm Sam from Oxygen Tech, and today we're going to learn about variables and data types in Dart. Variables are foundational building blocks of a program, and they're used to store values for later use. So it's very important to understand how variables work. Variables store data of different types. So there are different types of data. There can be words and text, there can be numbers, there can be lists of information. There's multiple data types that can be used. So today we're just going to talk about a couple of the basic ones and just demonstrate how variables can be declared and used in programs.
So, as we've discussed before, Dart is a programming language that drives Flutter. If you want to become proficient in Flutter, you need to get your head around Dart. You need to be able to understand it and use it well. So today we're going to use DartPad to work out what variables are and data types, some of the basic data types that you'll see used in Flutter and Dart. Make this a bit bigger. So here we've got a default program in DartPad. So if you go to dartpad.dev, you will find this default. If you want to make a new file, just go new Dart snippet and it'll load up what we have here. So just get rid of this part in the middle and we have the main function. So as we've discussed before, the main function is where programs start in Dart. So the computer will look for the main function as an entry point to the program. So today we are going to talk about variables and data types in Dart. So first, before we begin, this that I've written up here, this is a comment. So how you have two slashes at the front. So if you write a comment, it means that the system will ignore that when it's running the program. That's just a comment for us, for the developers to read, to gain some context around the program and to better understand it. So first, what is a variable? So a variable can be declared like so. So var, V-A-R, is a key word that can be used to declare a variable. So if we're going to create a variable, we could say var name equals Sam. So to break this down, again, var is the key word. Say you're creating a variable or the type. The name that's the name of the variable, and this here is the value of the variable. So the equal sign in this context means that this value is assigned to this name, to this variable. So let me just demonstrate. If we print this, print name, and run. So again, the program ignores the comments that we've made, and I'll just focus on here. So we've declared a variable with the value of Sam, and then we print that variable, and over here you'll see it's printed Sam. Perfect. All right. So a variable stores a reference to an object. So in this instance, the object being stored is this word here, Sam, and it will be accessed under the name. So what is an object? In Dart, an object is essentially the parent data type of all data types except for null. So don't worry too much about null. It's just a return of nothing. It's a nothing value. Null, null is what that is. So object being the parent of all other data types, for example, objects, you can think of it kind of like a family tree. So object is the common ancestor. So the data type of this bit of text here is a string. A string is text. So string, so that's what the family tree would look like. And a couple of other data types that we'll look at today. Object is a parent of num, which is a number, which is a parent of int, which is an integer. An integer is a number with no decimal point, which means also object is a parent of number, which is a parent of double. So a double does have decimal places. So if I were to say 1.45, that's a double. If I were to say 8, that's an integer, an int value. And the other data type we'll look at today is a Boolean. Bool is the key word for that. So a Boolean is simply true or false. So we're going to use these data types today. So this here is a value of string, but we've used the data type of var. So the reason we can do that in Dart is because the Dart system can work out the type of the data we're using. So as an example here, we can reassign the value of name by saying name equals Digby. Oops. Semicolon. So that's fine, we get no issues there. If we run this, now it will print the name Digby rather than the name Sam, because the value of name has been reassigned to Digby. You see it's printed up here. Now let's try to assign it the value of 8, an integer value. So we get an error here. So a value of type integer cannot be assigned to a variable of type string. So that's the issue there. So with the var keyword, once you've assigned a data type to it, from then on Dart will recognize, okay, name is a string. It will always be a string. So that's called type safety. Once you've assigned the type, it remains the same in Dart. So there are ways around this if you want to change the type of a value. So what we could do is write, that's a type object. So as we can see here, object is the parent type of a string or of an integer. So it can be assigned a string, an integer, a double, a boolean, it doesn't matter. So if we assign it a boolean, that's fine as well. And if we print it, it should reveal the new value, which is false, a Boolean value. Object isn't the only data type we can use here. So another one is dynamic. If the value is going to change data types, you can make it dynamic. So it can be a string, a Boolean, a number, an integer, a double, it doesn't matter. But today we're going to focus on we're going to declare the data types as we create them. So instead of having this as dynamic or var or object, I'm going to say this is a string. Okay, now we'll get that error here because we cannot reassign a string value to a Boolean value if we've declared it as a string. So string, that's a common data type. You'll see in all programming languages, we need to write words. We use words in our programs. So I'm going to get rid of that print statement as well. So next, let's have num. So as we've seen up here, object is the parent of number, which is the parent of integer or double. So let's use the num keyword, create a variable called age, and assign it the value of 30. Okay, so that's fine, get no errors there. We can also give it the value of 30.5. Still no errors, that's fine. Now if we change this to an integer, we get an error here because this value is a double, a decimal point number, and it's being assigned to an integer number, which should be a whole number. Let's get rid of that. And then a double, say height equals 1.86. That's fine. All right, and then the last type we want to look at today, Boolean, which is true or false. So bool is hungry equals true, always. Okay, no issues there. So these yellow underlines here we're getting just because we haven't used that variable yet. It means we've declared a variable but it's not being used, which is essentially a waste of memory. So when a variable stores a reference to an object, it stores it in memory. So it takes up some space in memory on your device. So if we're just declaring these variables and not using them, it's a waste of memory. It's just going to slow your device down. We know these basic data types, our string, our integer and double, and our Boolean. I want to use some operations on them. So we'll get rid of our little family tree. Get rid of this. I just want to keep this here that a variable stores a reference to an object in memory. So that's important to remember. All right, so let's see what we can do. We're going to try to use some operations. So operations are changes that can be made to a value in a variable. So first, I want to look at a couple of basic string operations. So there are a lot you can use, but I want to focus on some simple ones. In future weeks, I'll get into it in a little bit more detail. So one of the ones I'll look at in future weeks is getting the index in a name. So if I wanted to pull one letter from the string value, I would use indexing to access that. And you can make substrings, so you can return part of a string. So if you had a string can be more than one word, I should add as well. So that's a string as well. A whole sentence, a paragraph could be a string. That's all fine. So one of the things we can do is use a print statement to demonstrate this. So print name dot to uppercase. So as you could probably work out, it takes a value of name and it goes through and makes every character uppercase. So up here it's printed Sam Harvey in all uppercase. You can also change it to lowercase. And as you could imagine, up here we'll see the characters printed in lowercase. Okay, so another one that's important to know, if you have a form on Flutter, for example, and someone's trying to enter, say, an email address or a password, sometimes they might leave a space at the end when they input. So you don't want that space to be included in, for example, their password or their email address, because you might get an error. So I just want to demonstrate. So I've added some spaces at the start here. So let's just print name as is, and you'll see that it's indented a bit from the spaces once it prints. So we've got all this space here that we don't want. So what we can do is trim. So if you're getting user input in a text field in a Flutter app, it's important to use trim so you can ensure you get rid of the white space around the outsides. So if I run this, it should be aligned back at the start. There we go. So that trims the white space around the string. And another operation for strings that's important, you may have already seen before, is it's called string interpolation. So string interpolation. So it basically means using a string value within another string. So if I write, hello, my name is name. So using this $sign and then the name of the variable, you can print that variable value within another string. So hello, my name is Sam Harvey comes up without an issue. And you can also, let's to upper case. So you'll see this wouldn't work because it takes the variable name and then it assumes that the rest of this is part of the outer string. So what we do here is use curly brackets. And that means, okay, this name dot to uppercase. Oops, that wouldn't have worked anyway. Let's change that to uppercase. So now that should work. So it should say, hello, my name is, and it should print Sam Harvey in all uppercase. There we go. So those are just a few things you can use on strings. And now let's move on to numbers. So the operations I'd like to look at for numbers are basic mathematical operations. So plus, minus, multiplication, division, and modulus is another one that you may or may not have heard of depending on whether you've used it before. So these can all be used on either integers or doubles, so they work for any number type, that's fine. So what we're going to do here, let's say int num1 equals 5, int num2 equals 6. Alright, so let's print we'll get rid of this print statement up here. Print num1 plus num2. So you could do it this way, or you could store it in a new value. So you could say int result equals num1 plus num2. And you could just print result. So either way, you'll have the same outcome, but sometimes you can saving the result in a new variable by just doing the calculation during the print. So if I run this, it should print the same result twice. Okay, that was quite slow, but we have 11 printed twice. So let's get rid of this result variable and that print statement. So we've seen that addition works just fine. Num1 plus num2 equals 11. So let's try subtraction. So 5 minus 6, which is of course -1. And then this star here is multiplication. So we have 5 multiplied by 6, which is 30. And now division, let's change it so we don't get a double as a result. So 30 divided by 6 is of course equal to 5. So now the last operator we're going to use here is the modulus. So the modulus is a handy one if you're looking to find the remainder of a division. So if we say 24 divided by 5, we know that 5 doesn't cleanly go into 24. We should have a remainder of 4 when we use the modulus operator here. So let's have a go and see what result we get. So I've got 4. So this is a good way to find out if a number is divisible by another number. So let's say 15 modulo 5. So that's 15 divided by 5, and it'll return whatever the remainder is. So you could probably guess whether there's going to be a remainder here. And it prints 0. So you could write a function that determines whether something's divisible by 5 by expecting the value of 0. You say if 15 modulo 5 is equal to 0, then take this action. So it can be handy in certain circumstances. So those are the operators I'd like to look at for numbers today. Again, there are more, but that's all I'm going to go into today. And we're not going to touch on Boolean operators because I'd like to do that in a future video where we talk about conditional expressions and statements, but don't worry about that yet. So to finish off today, let's just try to print all these values together. So, hello, my name is name, I am age years old. So something we can do here, you'll see we're going to break a line. So one easy way to do it is I can just add a space there and then start a new line with new quotation marks. That'll work just fine. Another way is if you put 3 quotation marks at the start and then 3 at the end. Oops, that's 4. Three at the end, you can do a multi-line string. I am height meters tall and am I hungry? This is certainly is hungry. Alright. Just even that up. Alright, let's see what we return here. Okay, it says, hello, my name is Sam Harvey, I'm 30 years old, I am 1.86 meters tall, and am I hungry? This is certainly true. So we've used our 4 different data types in string interpolation to produce this one long string. So we've used the name, the age, the height, and the Boolean of true. So now I'd like to do something different. So what I'm thinking is we can calculate the area of some basic shapes. So we're going to use integer and double values for this. So let's see here. Start with the rectangle. Actually, what I might do is first write out what I plan to print. So rectangle, and I will insert the variable there using string interpolation. Then we're going to do a triangle. Oops. Triangle. And a circle. Okay. Semicolon. Alright, so rectangle, we will need, let's use an integer for this one. Let's say height equals 5 and integer width equals, let's say 7. For the triangle, we will need the base width, which we can make equal to 6, and say triangle height. To differentiate it from the rectangle height, I've just put tri height equals 5. So just with the way I'm naming variables, you might have noticed the first letter is lowercase. And if there's 2 words, the second word starts with an uppercase letter. So that is the way that variables are named in Dart. So I won't go into it too much now, but it's just something to be aware of. And circle. We just need, let's use a double for this one, radius of, let's say 3. Okay. Now, to calculate the rectangle area, all we do is multiply height by width. So for rectangle, rect area. Okay, triangle, we will say we'll use a double for this one because it could end up being a double as a result. Tri area equals base width times tri height divided by 2. Alright. So I put this as a double just in case, because dividing an odd number by 2 would lead to a double, but in our case I don't think it's going to be an issue, just a safer thing to do. And you should know that a double can take an integer value. So as you see here, I've put the double radius as 3, and there's no error there, but I'm just going to change that to 3.5 for our circumstances. Now we need the value of pi. I could just put in 3.14 as an approximation, but let's use the Dart math library. Import Dart math. I'm going to say as math, which means we can access the operations from the Dart math library using the math keyword. So double circ area equals math.pi times radius squared. Okay. So here we want tri area, and here we want circ area. Okay, let's run this and see what we have. Okay, we have some results. We've got the area of a rectangle is 35, let's say, meters, 35 meters squared, triangle 15 meters squared, and a circle 38.48 meters squared. So this is too many decimal places for my liking. So we can change this using our curly brackets because we're going to use an operation on the circ area variable. So we're going to say dot to string as fixed and give it the number 2. So we want that to be 2 decimal places. Let's see what that yields. All right, that looks a bit better, a bit neater. So this is just a template you can use to calculate the size, the surface area of a rectangle, triangle, or circle. You can change the values. Doesn't really matter what these values are. It should not have any issues. So that's about all we're going to do today. As a recap, I'll just quickly go over variables store values for later use in a program. They can be of different types. So we've used strings, which are text. We've used numbers, which can be integers, a whole number, or a double, which is typically a decimal number, but a double can also be given an integer value and hold it. It'll just change it. Say if it was a 5, it would be 5.0. And the way to declare a variable is data type, name of the variable equals value of the variable. So that's the way we declare a variable, and then we can use it later. So we've used base width later here, we've used triangular area later here. So it can be used multiple times. The value can be reassigned. It can be very beneficial, and it's very important for programs. There are other data types that you should be aware of. These are just some basic ones. We're not going into any others today. We didn't really go into Boolean values too much today. In my next video, I plan to use some operations on Booleans to use conditional statements. So conditional statements create branches in your program and logic to control the flow of the logic. So you could say, if this value is true, I'm going to perform this function. If this value is true, I'm going to perform this function. So it changes the outcome based off your inputs. Other data types to be aware of, there's collections of types. So collection types. So instead of storing one value in a variable, you can store a list of values. So a list is a data type. Another one that I'll cover in a future video. And that can lead to a few more operations you can use in your program as well and give you a bit more functionality. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.